So hey folks, today we're going to talk about how you can improve your Kotlin code using lint checks. And I'm going to talk from my experience. I work at Scape. We are building a visual positioning system that allows for AR content to be anchored at specific outdoor locations. And when we built our SDK, we obviously wanted to add a linter in place. And I'm just going to go through all of the things that we learned during the process. So we're going to start with the what. What is lint? Why would you need it? And then we're going to talk to some steps on how you can use it and how you can also customize it. You can also write your custom link checks if you want. So let's go ahead and start. So what is lint actually? The first definition that comes to mind is that short little fibers that are stuck to your clothes and are really annoying, especially for myself. And I actually always carry a lint roller with me because I find it super annoying. I have one at work as well. This is the proof. But now in a more serious manner, the term lint appeared in 1978 in the Bell Laboratories, where they were examining C code. And then 1 year later, it was finally used outside Bell Labs in the 7th version of Unix. What about Android? So in 2011, the first version of Android Lint appeared, which was open source under Apache license. I like these two philosophies of Lint. Number one is that false positives are better than false negatives, which means although this is not ideal, Lint will surface potential bugs even when they're not so sure about them. The second one is to focus on Android issues and leave all the IDE-related issues to the compiler. So for example, if the IDE will complain that you were, for instance, assigning a variable to itself, you don't want to yield that warning twice, so you should leave it to the IDE, to Android Studio. How would you run it? So there are two ways. Through the IDE, through Android Studio, which means it's going to be on the fly. You're going to see the warnings on your screen. And you can also run inspections by name. I'm going to show that to you later. And if you use Gradle, which is probably what you're going to use if you're going to have a CI in place, so you're going to just have to run a Gradle task from the command line. And what's cool about it is that you can also generate XML and HTML reports. How does it work? It takes all your source code. It uses lint XML configuration file. I'm going to show you a bit later about that. And the linter tool will compile that into linter warnings that will be based on a category. So from correctness, usability, to security, to performance, also internationalizations of strings. This is just the example that we maybe see all the time when you use an old Gradle dependency, and there is also already a newer one out there. There are many more, from correctness, if you're inflating wrong params, from all the way to security. Let's say you exported a service that doesn't require permission. For instance, performance, especially when you're not handling your UI properly. So what was the goal for us when we said we want to enable lint? We actually had the project was already existing, and we said we want to put it in place so that it will run on every build. If there are any new lint error issues, it will break the build, and we wanted to basically to go from to 0 unchecked errors in the code. Well, that sounds really beautiful, but this is what happened to us. This is me and my colleague Bilal. We realized that if we wanted to make the CI pipeline passing, it was not that easy because the code was already there, and we already had quite a few lint warnings in place. So what we did, we actually decided to take the second approach, but let's see the first one. So when you run it from the command line, you only have to run the lint task. So the first approach was that you want to treat all warnings as errors, which means that everything will fail because the build will break if you have too many, if you have if you already have quite a big code base. But the second approach is that you can configure it using the lint XML file. And I'm going to show you an example here. And then you can say what types of issues do you want to break the build? What types of issues do you want to ignore for now? And you can take it little by little. Maybe this sprint you just want to start fixing the icon missing density folder, which means you don't have all the icons for all the resolutions. So you can say ignore for now, and little by little you can start fixing those. And although this configuration file is applied module-wise, you can also apply it per pet, which is really cool. And the last one will be, for example, if you want to promote a specific code guideline in your team, you can say, I never want to accept hard-coded text values in my code base. So then the severity will be error, which means it will be an error and it will break the build. There are also other lint options. You can disable, enable specific group IDs of lint warnings. You can also turn it off when you need to. You can abort on error, so stop the build if errors are found. And also you can ignore all warnings and just complain about the errors. Ignore the warnings and complain about the errors only. There is another one I like, which is ignore test sources. Because, for instance, in our case, we didn't want to make our CI slower, so you don't want it to take even longer. So there is maybe no point in going through the source code of the tests, and maybe you just don't care. Another thing would be just running it per debug variant or release variant, whatever you want to, because otherwise, if you just run Gradle lint, it will just build for all these variants, and it might slow down your CI process. So we don't really want to fix all the warnings, do we? So it's quite okay to suppress stuff around, which is what we did as well, because sometimes you don't care. Or, for example, if you're building a library or an SDK and you have some public methods exposed, you don't want the linter to complain about unused methods in your code. Let's say maybe you didn't create tests for them, but you don't want to have to use them every time. Yeah, and you don't want to break the build every time, so it's quite okay to suppress stuff around. For example, here, there is a new API and you want to suppress that. And it's better to try suppressing by statement. If that's not okay, suppress by method. And if as a last resort, suppress by class. Another options in lint will be to set specific errors like group IDs, like Gradle dependency, to mark this as informational only instead of errors. So they will still appear in your lint report, but they will not break the build. Another cool feature is the baseline, which means you can take a snapshot of your current state of the lint report, especially if your code base is quite big already and you didn't start with a new project. So you're going to create a snapshot, you're going to run a lint debug task, and then those files will be created, and you can check them in your source control. And whenever you want to change that, you just have to remove them and recreate them again. And this is good because maybe you just want to know if you introduce new errors, new warnings, and so on. Annotations. There are so many. My favorite one is a value constraint, because especially for us, because we're building an SDK, we know that developers don't always read the manual. So then it's better to have some value constraints on the input parameters, let's say, and this way they will see a nice pop-up saying, hey, your index is out of range, your input parameters are not supported by us. Enabling it is quite easy. You just need to use the annotation library from AndroidX. These are just some examples. So, for example, you have a string resource. You want to make sure that the input is an actual string resource. The boundaries, as I said, you want to make sure they don't use out of boundaries values. requires permission, visible for testing. For example, if you have a method that's private in your module, but you still want to make it available in your tests. So all of this applies to Android, right? But what about Kotlin? What about our Kotlin modules? So there is good news, starting with Android plugin 3.10. We can now apply Android Lint to Java and Kotlin modules. This is one that is, of course, available because it's the most annoying when you have a obsolete Gradle dependency. There is another way that maybe you didn't see it, but if you go through inspections, you can see what are the available linter checks in place for Kotlin, and by default they're not enabled. So it might be worth checking them out. So it would be like from Kotlin property access, when you want to make sure there is a prefix whenever you want to get to do a getter, to keeping lambda parameters last, to not using Kotlin hard-coded values in your method names, for example, and for nullness. So what happened between 3.10 and 3.40? We realized, well, actually on our skin, that before 3.340, if you package a library together with the lint checks, all the users, all the consumers of your library will also have those lint checks applied to their project. So this is not ideal because maybe you have company set of rules, like some coding guidelines that were specific to your team. So they came up with lint publish option. So you can enable it or disable it. So maybe there are situations in which you want to publish your library with your lint checks in place, but now there is an opportunity as well to disable that. So what are the other options? Right now, there are quite a few. For example, KT Lint, I think it's built from by the guys from Pinterest. They have quite a large set of rules in place. They are open source and they contribute a lot to the repository, so they keep adding stuff. I think they have more than 200 rule sets, if I remember correctly. And most of them, they are based on formatting. Quite a few, they're based on formatting. So for example, indentation problems, unused imports, trailing one spaces, no empty class bodies. This is their GitHub page, so I recommend going through them because there are quite a few, and maybe, who knows, maybe you have something that you want to use in your linter checks. So let's say you didn't find what you needed there, and you want to write your own custom lint tools, which is what we did. I'm going to just show a small example. For instance, you don't want to allow for sound reps. You don't want to allow it for the double bank because it can result in NPs. So let's go through all the steps that are required. Before we go there, it's important to understand how does it work. So it relies on a universal abstract tree, which means it will work for any programming language. So it will work on Java and Kotlin together. So everything is a U element, which is the root of everything, and then you have your file, your class, and your member. And as an example, if you have this class, mytest.java or Kotlin, it will create a U file, a U class with a class name, a field for every field, and then it's going to split it up in identifiers and expressions. If you're just starting with it, I really like this recursive log because it's just going to spit out all your syntax tree. So for example, here, it's going to print the U file, U class, and U field exactly how they are, and then you can start writing your own detectors based on that. So let's say you are just building, you're just going to have 50 lint checks, but of course you don't want to run every lint check on every source file in your code base. This is why they have a UST scanner, which means all the scanning will be done once on every file, so you won't have to go through every file again for every lint check. There are four 4 main things that you have to implement when you write your own lint check. First one is the issue. What exactly are you trying to solve? I'm gonna look for sound reps in my code. The detector will contain an issue and also a scope. So where do I want to look? Maybe I don't want to look in all the source code. Maybe I just want to look in XML files because I'm looking for a layout issue. Implementation will be how do I want to look for them? I'm going to show you an example then. And the registry is actually just a catalog where I specify my custom issues because I don't want to put them in the registry that's already in place. I will build my own one. So for example, you can have detector with the implementation, and in the same detector, you can handle two or more issues. You don't have to build a detector for every separate issue. And yet you can put them together in your own custom registry. And because you don't want them to be as part as your code base, you can put them as a separate module or even a different project if you feel like you're going to reuse them across other projects. So you just have to add a few dependencies to your Gradle file. And then let's start with the actual implementation. So the implementation will just specify the detector and the scope. In our case, because we're looking for sound reps, we're going to search in all the files, in all the Java files and Kotlin files. And then the issue is quite simple. It's quite straightforward. You just need to make sure you are putting reasonable ID and explanation, because all of this will appear as a pop-up in the IDE. So you have the ID for us for sound rep, and then the explanation. This is what the user will see whenever they input something like that. And then the category for us is going to be correctness, and severity error, because we do want to break the build if we find something like this. And then the detector is quite straightforward. So you just need to use the scanner and then parse all the files. And just, if you see here, you're going to visit the class, you're going to go through all the code, all the UObjects, and then you're going to look for that pattern, for the double bang. And then you're just simply going to report it, and that's it, hopefully. The last thing is just the registry, which is, as I said, just a catalog of your issues. Let's say here we're going to have 2. Maybe we don't want 4 sound reps, and maybe we want to forbid late inits. And the only method you have to override is get issues, so that the compiler knows which ones you're looking for. And then one other thing you have to take into consideration is to adding the registry to your Gradle file, because you want to package it with your project with the registry. And then that's it. You're gonna run it, but you can also do some testing. I know it sounds boring, but it's actually quite easy, and it's great just to make sure you build it correctly. So you just need the tools dependency for the tests. And we can start with the most basic one. Just say you want to test the registry. So you want to see if you set the correct numbers of issues. In our case, it's 2, because we already did 2 for this example. And then you want to test that when you want to get those issues, you actually have the ones that you're expecting. And then you can also test that a 4 sound rep warning will be detected. So let's say you're going to have this method not valid that contains a string, an optional string, and then you apply the 4 sound rep on it. And then you can just write in your test saying that you expect that error on that line. And this is how you're going to test the specific issue. One more thing, they always say that it's under development, so don't get scared when you see something like this, because the linter is still unstable. They're still going to change many things. But this is fine. This is pretty easy to work with. And then let's say you run the test with clean build tests, and voila, we found them all. One last thing is the quick fix. I find this really useful because maybe you want to specify an automatic fix action in your IDE. So you want to say, to have a button there that says, fix it for me. I don't want to do it myself. So you're just going to specify a descriptor of how to action or how to address the problem. This is the only thing you have to do is to create a lint fix object. In this example, because I wanted to keep it short, you can just say replace late init with something else. But then, of course, you will have to do much more because your property is optional. So you're still gonna have to go through the code and fix it. But at least it's gonna fix the warning or the error. Yeah, and then if you want to test it, you just have to say that I expect it so whenever I encounter this issue, I expect it to have this fix. And that's it. Thank you. Hopefully, if you're starting with a new project, it's going to be so much easier because you can sit down with your team and say, this is the rules that I want to keep in place. But also, if you are like us and you already have a project, it's easy to iterate upon and just do it gradually. You don't need to do it all at once. And I hope that this short presentation will give you a quick start to what you need to do. Thanks. If you have any questions, I'm here or I'm around here. And if you want to see the source code, it's going to be on GitHub, if you want to.
Did anybody have any questions for Emma?
Just wondering, where did you find any documentation for Android Lint? I know that this one,
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, the official one. Yeah, the Android,
Yeah,
how
but
to improve your
Yeah, but
Lint.
it's quite outdated, and I don't know, like, when was the last time they updated the documentation of Lint?
Yeah, to be honest, the thing I showed with the publish, let me just go to it. I had to dig in myself. You're very right.
Okay.
So for instance, this thing,
Definitely. But
this thing. So we had to learn it on our skin. We were packaging our library together with all the lint checks. And there was nothing about this in the documentation until we dig down and we saw, hey, 3.4 has this new feature, which means we just have to upgrade the tool. But yes, you are definitely right.
So you're on your own.
You're on your own, but as I said, you can use Kotlin. It's a tool developed in Pinterest, and it's open source. You can contribute to it, and I saw they are quite. They frequently add issues, and they fix them if there is any. So maybe you can find something that's really useful for you. And there is also Detect. It's quite similar, but Kotlin is more about formatting. So it depends if you want to promote a specific set of guidelines in your team, or you just want to make sure you have a stable code. It depends what you need.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, if anyone has any issues, any questions, I will be here, and also you can find me on Twitter later.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Can we have another round of applause, please?